Hey, my name is Rags, and I'm the Kenyan wine brat. And with me, I have a little teeny bit of wine, which is called a port wine. So, the specific port that I'm drinking is one from a Texas winery called Messina Hoff, and it's called Ebony Ports of Call. One interesting thing is that the name port, just like the name champagne, comes. Let me break it down a different way. So, for wine to be called champagne, it has to come from the Champagne region of France. Any other type of bubbly is called sparkling wine. Now, this one, I mean, like, this wine is called Ebony Ports of Call. These guys who made this thing, which is a port style wine, can't call it port because it has to come, for it to be called a port, it has to come from Oporto in Portugal. So port wines come from Portugal. What's a port wine? So this is the history of port. So what happened is during the 17th century, Britain was fighting with France. Now France makes spectacular wines. The French dudes, actually, the British went to the French and they told the French, I know we're fighting with you, but is it possible? Could you pretty please allow us to also drink your wine while we are kicking your behinds? And the French were like, monsieur, let me think about it. No, no way. I guess they say that in French. Anyway, so basically, the British were left with no choice but to travel around the world and figure out a place or find a place that would sell them wine. They found Portugal, and apparently, the people in Portugal made decent wine. So, what they did is they bought wine from Portugal, shipped the wine to Britain, and on the way, they realized that Portuguese wine tended to just become bad, become terrible. And so they decided, you know what, let's figure out a way of making this Portuguese wine last the travel, or last the trip from Portugal to Britain. What their geniuses in Britain did is that they added brandy into the wine. And what happened is that in the end, the wine survived the trip, and by the time it reached Britain, it was spectaculoso. Spectacular. So that's how port wine was invented. The thing about port wine you've got to realize is that it has a high alcohol content. Why? Because of the brandy that's injected into the wine. So this is how they make wine. The port wine. They tend to ferment the wine grapes like they normally ferment regular wine grapes. But in the middle of the fermentation, what they do is they usually add brandy into the wine, the grapes. And so this brandy is usually called, what do they call it? They call it aguardente. That's in Portuguese. It's called aguardente. So aguardente is 77% alcohol. And this is injected into the fermented grapes. And so what happens is that the act of adding alcohol into the fermented grapes basically kills the yeast in the grapes or in the grape juice. And what happens is that it causes the product to be sweet, causes the wine to be sweet, and also to have high alcohol in it. So ports are really high in alcohol, and they're usually pretty much from 18 to 20%. This wine, actually, it's a port style wine, and it has 16% alcohol. So I'd say it's usually from 16 to maybe 20% in alcohol. So anyway, there are a bunch of the different types of port wines. One type of port wine is called a ruby port. Now, a ruby port can be recognized by its bright ruby color. And also, it basically when they make it, they usually age it in either in stainless steel containers or in oak barrels. And they don't age it for a long time. It's usually 3 years or less. The next one is Tawny Port. And a Tawny Port is usually aged with a minimum of around 6 years, and it can go from 6 years to 10 years to 20 years, 30, 40, 50. And if you buy a 10-year Tawny Port, it's probably like $10. 20-year Tawny Port, it tends to be like $30. So a 50-year Tawny Port is a lot of moolah. And then there's another port called a white port. A white port is made using white grapes. And it's aged in the same way. It's either aged in stainless steel containers or it's usually aged in oak barrel. And it looks white. It looks like a white wine, but it has a lot of alcohol in it, and it's sweet. So, another type of port wine is called the vintage port. And if 2001 is a great year, the winemakers will make a wine using 2001 grapes and just label it 2001, and it'll be known as a vintage wine. And vintage wines, man, are so expensive. I had that 1955 and also 1970 was a great year in Portugal. And the wines of 1970 and 1955 are really expensive. So anyway, the region where most port wines come from in Portugal is called Douro, the Douro region. Now, for us Kenyans, the name Douro sounds actually like a Luo. We have a tribe in Kenya called a Luo tribe. One of the most well-known half Luo is President Barack Obama. His father was a Luo and his mom was American. So he's Ameriluo or something. Anyway, the word Douro sounds like a Luo word, but actually it's a place in Portugal, and they're well known for creating and making spectacular port wines. So that's all I had to say about ports. I could go on and on and on and on, and I know this is like for newbies like us, I know this is like too much information, TMI, and so I'll just I'll just stop right now and just let you do your stuff, let you go on with your life. And what I wanted to say last but not least is thank you so much for watching me. I really appreciate it. I know that you'd be watching anything in the internets, but you decided to watch me, and I thank you so much. Have a nice day. Bye. I'll see you at the next episode.